Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365. Yes, you've got your Mac and Mac guys in front of our Ocean's backdrops, Ocean's Casino, with our green screen. Because he doesn't have a green screen, Geoff Mosher can wear a nice white starch shirt.
How about that?
Looking good there, Moshe. Very nice.
You see the hula dancers? I'm trying to like bring this warm weather here.
Yeah, try to bring that into existence.
That's
Geoff
right.
Mosher.
I mean, you got the
I'm a
Ocean
little
Casino
tired
there, people, and they would love the warm weather to come, and what a great place that is. So yeah, I'm just trying to dress it into existence.
Very, very nice. You're doing a hell of a job. I do want to start here because again, you're very well connected around the league, and you get sourced information and stuff like that. Is there any truth to the rumor that Darius Slay once grabbed the pencil from behind Matt Patricia's ear and tried to poke his eye out with it? And if that didn't happen in Detroit, could it happen here in Philadelphia this year?
I cannot confirm nor can I deny that scenario might have taken place. So yeah, there's obviously friction there, and if Matt Patricia is going to be a coach on the Eagles, and there's a really strong possibility of that happening. You have to wonder if maybe Nick, who's done such a great job of managing, adversity and personalities and egos, even though Matt Patricia would not be coaching Darius Slay, I think the wounds are so deep that you would think that someone has to have an intervention, Nick Sirianni, with those two guys, sit them down, talk about the betterment of the team. And I don't know this for a fact, but I do know that when guys go through the experience that Matt Patricia went through in Detroit and they fail miserably, it can change them. You'd have to see, is Josh McDaniels as much of an egomaniac in Las Vegas?
I think he is.
He might be, but like everybody said, the team was going to quit on him, and they wound up winning four of their last 5 games. Yeah. So I mean, I think a conversation could probably help smooth things over, and the fact that Patricia will not be coaching Slay is probably a big deal. But if Patricia sat down and said, you know what, I was wrong. I said this about you. I was clearly wrong. You made 5 Pro Bowls. You deserve all the respect you can get. I was wrong. I would think that could be something that would be, moved on from, but that would have to probably happen first.
Yeah, it is interesting because Slay is not shy about it. I mean, he does not like Matt, and he was on social media again last night when it popped up, and he was saying this is not the same. People were saying, "Hey, they're professionals; they'll get them." And he kind of said, this guy was really disrespectful to me. There seems to be. I'm surprised the Eagles are even considering this. That's a team captain. It's a Pro Bowl cornerback. It's a good coach. I'm not saying that, especially defensively. And even Darius will admit he's good with X's and O's. But I'm surprised, considering how strong the locker room has been, that they want to go down this route. So it'll be interesting.
Well, this is sort of the offseason of surprise in that regard. And Nick Sirianni, I think, made the statement when he talked about hiring Sean Desai over Dennard Wilson. Sometimes you have to do what you think is best for the team. That was not an easy decision for Nick. It was not, a slam dunk. But at the end of the day, he went with a guy who has been an experienced play caller, who's been a defensive coordinator. And he made that decision, John, knowing that Dennard, it wasn't going to sit well with Dennard Wilson. And as soon as they announced it, he said, look, we'd still love to have Dennard Wilson. So he knew the idea of Dennard not wanting to be there was going to happen. And the same thing with Darius Slay. Darius Slay might be upset, but what's he going to do? Hold out, not play? I mean, again, I think Nick's got a plan. I would think he has a plan for, if I bring this guy in, I got to have a conversation, smooth things over, and we'll see how it goes from there.
So you think it was more of Dennard Wilson walking away than the Eagles pushing him out the door?
Absolutely. Now they may, listen, I mean, he did a great job. He didn't get the job. He got passed over for. I imagine he expressed disappointment with that. And normally what guys then tend to do is see if they can find a different job elsewhere. And maybe that didn't sit well with the organization. I don't know how it went or what exactly went down. I know there are some reports out there. I haven't corroborated anything like that. But I mean, it just seemed from the start when Nick volunteered at the podium that Dennard, we'd love to have him back, that there was disappointment there, that it looked like it was going to be headed down a bad road for them being able to work it out.
So let's talk about Sean Desai, Jeff. He does have experience. Nick made a big deal out of that. Dennard has never been a coordinator before. But Sean's only done it for 1 year. He's got the obviously he's a direct student of Vic Fangio, and that's the philosophy they want to continue. But Dennard was in the same philosophy under Jonathan Gannon. Does it just come down to experience? This guy has called plays before, defensive plays, and Dennard hasn't. Is that basically what it came down to?
I don't know, John, that was the ultimate factor. I think you go through an interview process too. You get as much input as you can from the person you're interviewing, background. They had Dennard there in the building. They saw that he did a good job. And I believe that's why of all the coaches, he was a finalist, right, for the job. But we know that there's a Vic Fangio influence on this organization, that he's hanging around the org. He could have been the defensive coordinator had things worked out differently. Yeah. Why do you think he was hanging around so much?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They thought Gannon potentially would get a head coaching job. They were right. They just thought it was going to happen before the Super Bowl, not after. And Vic couldn't wait around. So he took the Miami job, understandably. So it's funny because I think you, John, were like one of the first to sort of point out years and years ago that if somehow Sean McVay like touched your shoulder, you were a head coaching. And it feels like that Vic Fangio is now like the defensive version of that. If you have any connection any way to Vic Fangio, you're automatically going to be a coordinator or head coach candidate. But I think it's important to remember that Sean Desai came to Chicago under Mark Trestman, who was an offensive head coach, but I believe Mel Tucker was the defensive coordinator at the time. Then shortly it became John Fox, right, who was one of the best defensive minds in the league. And then it turned over to the Matt Nagy and Vic Fangio regime. So not only has Sean Desai been around Vic Fangio, but to also be around Mel Tucker and John Fox gives him a pretty good library of defensive minds to have learned from. And then to go out there for a year in Seattle was good too. So he's going to do things differently, I suspect, than Jonathan Gannon. All the Fangio acolytes run the same conceptual stuff, but they do things differently. I believe from what I've seen in his Chicago tape, he's probably a little bit more creative with his fronts, what he does with them, moving linemen around and things like that.
Yeah, he likes to line up the two pass rushers on the same, overload them on the same side to sort of take advantage of some weaknesses. But Jeff, here's the thing. Here's my issue. And this is not Sean's fault. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the Eagles are coming off a 70 sack season. I mean, they're not getting 70 sacks next year. So the expectations are so out of whack.
That's funny.
I feel almost bad for this guy.
I even said on the podcast, I feel like Sean's walking into a little bit of a buzzsaw.
Oh,
First of all, no Eagles fan has actually liked an Eagles defensive coordinator since Jim Johnson. I mean, that's just a fact. They tolerated for a small stretch there Jimmy Schwartz, right? Because he was a name. But, the sticks defense drove everybody crazy. And then the getting beat over the top drove everybody crazy. They tolerated McDermott for a year because it was a really difficult transition to take over from Jim Johnson. Nobody liked Billy Davis, but they knew that Chip's offense wasn't helping him out. But when's the last time you heard the Eagles fans universally say, I love this defensive coordinator? It's been a long, long time. And poor Sean Desai has to walk into a defense, right, that gets remade in an offseason.
Yeah.
I do need to ask you about this, the offensive coordinator. If the defense coordinator has a really impressive or at least nice NFL resume, worked under, able to tap into experience around the NFL, then you got Brian Johnson, who's a college coach who's been holding Jalen Hurts' hand for the last 2 years and has a great relationship with the Eagles star quarterback. Nick did a pretty good job of selling him the other day. Oh, he's on the headsets during the game with us. He's contributing. He's part of every single meeting, and Brian has given us reasons to do certain things. But his experience is certainly limited. Calling plays on a collegiate level is not like calling them on the NFL. I'm more scared of, although John and I are Gannon fans, more defenders than detractors, I'm actually more scared of losing Shane Steichen's play calling ability than Jonathan Gannon's defensive system, or what we're not calling it system, John. What are we calling it?
Philosophy.
I'm
trying to not say scheme. I'm trying to say philosophy.
Very good. What makes us think Brian Johnson, that the Eagles aren't going to skip a beat with Brian Johnson taking over the play calling from Shane Steichen?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we'll have to see, but here's the difference between the offensive side and the defensive side, right? And why you would promote one but go out of the house the other. First of all, when the whole thing started, searching started, defensive coordinators, I mean, Vance Joseph was available. Vic Fangio at one point was available. Sean Desai was available. The crop of play caller and experience on the defensive side that was available compared to offensive side was far superior. But to your point, teams that were interested in Brian Johnson, and there were teams that were interested, were told right from the bat, don't even bother. So I think Nick made this point or sort of answer your question. Unlike defense, the offense is Nick Sirianni's offense. It stays Nick Sirianni's offense. Even though he's not the play caller, I don't think Nick gets enough understanding of his influence on how the offense is going to be. And he pretty much said that at the combine. And he's like, look, I mean, I don't call the plays, but I was hired to bring an offense here to Philadelphia. And he mentioned himself and Patullo and Stoutland and Brian Johnson, who's been a big part of it too. So there's not nearly as much fluidity on the offensive side in losing Shane Steichen as there was in losing both Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis. So that's why, they felt Brian Johnson was a rising star anyway. They loved his development with Jalen Hurts. They saw him as a future offensive coordinator. And that's why they didn't really make advanced efforts. I mean, of course, they had to do 2 interviews for to satisfy the Rooney Rule. But one of them was a college kid from Iowa State, Nate Shieldhouse. So, I mean, the idea was that they were always going to promote Brian Johnson. And I think 8 or 9 times out of 10, when this situation arises, Nick does want to promote in-house. This was just defensively a chance to bring in a guy who is, more experienced in that side of the game and then had a great reputation.
You bring up Nick Rallis. Jonathan Gannon said something interesting out there. You were in Indy, Moshe, and he said, I don't know. It was like, I made a mistake with Nick Rallis. I don't know what he was trying to say. Nick got interviewed here for the coordinator job, but he got a promotion. You can't block guys from getting a promotion now anyway. You used to be able in the past if they were under contract, but you can't do that. What do you think he meant by that? I mean, he made him a defensive coordinator. He wasn't going to be a defensive coordinator here. Yeah.
I mean, you can only read the tea leaves here. Nick really talked about wanting to keep his coaching staff. Someone mentioned, the idea of you don't just take, that he's not. I think it was Nick who said you shouldn't just take guys, right? Now Nick took some guys with him from Indianapolis. However, the difference is, I don't know if Nick was saying like, if you're not under contract anymore and you sign with and you bring him over, then that's different than if you're under contract and you're asking to be let out of it. Okay, so I think what Jonathan, based on what Shane Steichen said. This is where you really put the tea leaves together. Shane Steichen sort of alluded in his podium interview at the Combine to wanting to take some Eagles guys, but he said, you know what? Some guys are under contract and you really can only do that. And he said Nick did a good job of making sure those guys were going to stay in-house. So read of that what you will. Did they get extensions or did Nick just say, you're not taking these guys because then we're going to have some problems and you don't want to have problems with me? And did that was that a response to Jonathan Gannon saying he made a mistake? I don't know. It's all tangled up in there. I think you can parse it the right way as saying Gannon. What I'm guessing is Gannon did the right thing by giving the guy a promotion, which is incredible because Nick Rallis is going to be a 27-year-old defensive coordinator, 28-year-old 29. Youngest. He looks like he's 19. Yeah. He looks like you're very young, but I don't know that he went through the proper protocol. Like, did he tell Nick, this is what I'm going to do, or did it just happen? It sounds like it was all so quick, and maybe he didn't run this up the right flagpoles and at least give the fair warning of what his intentions were.
All right, Moshe, I want to move over to the general manager because it is Howie season. We've officially entered it. And I thought this was tremendous. Maybe the most interesting thing said by either the coach or the general manager in their press sessions out in Indianapolis. Howie admitted that this past season, the Eagles went away from their usual modus operandi when it came to extending contracts. Because they'd gotten off to the good start and the mojo in the building was so good, he didn't want to potentially rock the boat by talking more so to one free agent than another and getting a deal done and then not being able to get another and hurt feelings and the like. Everything he said made sense. But now we have to evaluate it. And they have more free agents than they almost ever have going into an offseason. He's on record as saying, hey, we're losing guys. We're getting compensatory picks next year. We're not going to be able to keep everybody. Is he admitting defeat? or do we say,
Oh, sure, but defeat is relative. I mean, he's admitting defeat as far as I'm not going to be able to bring back all these guys. He knows that, but that doesn't mean he can't find creative and alternative ways to fill holes on the roster. There's no doubt about that. But I asked him, Jody. This is the first time I ever even thought to ask this kind of question. I asked him, "Are you even going to make offers to all of your free agents, even if they're you can't compete with them?" Figuring that at least that's what you do. You try your hardest, right? And he said, look, there's going to be guys who I know I can't even come close to matching, and I'm not going to insult them with some baseline offer, which I thought was a really candid answer from Howie. So we can, I don't know who those guys are. I mean, we can probably guess, but there are going to be some guys that just are told, thank you so much for your contributions. Appreciate it. I'm not going to insult you. Go out, go get your money. We know we can't pay you. So it's going to be fascinating to see which guys those are. And it is different because in 2017, he gave out extensions. He gave one to Alshon Jeffrey, who had been signed on a one-year deal. And I think he gave one to Tim Jernigan in the season as well, right?
Yeah, in season,
yeah. But he didn't have 18 other guys who were all playing great, or 7 or 8 other guys, all starters, all playing great, who would look at that and say, what about me? So there was no worry about sort of interrupting the locker room dynamic there. I usually look at some things Howie says with a side eye or just a skeptical eye because you have to. But in that case, I don't think I'm over rationalizing. I think he made the right decision. I think there could have been some real jealousy and bitterness if he had done that.
I think he did the right decision as well, Moshe. But I think there's another added part to it that he didn't mention. And I mentioned this on this show a bunch of times. He had no leverage. All these guys were having career years.
Right.
So they have all the leverage. So while I get how he wants to spin it, and I think he made the right decision, and the fact that, well, if I single out TJ Edwards, Chauncey might say, or vice versa, what about me? Everybody was having a career year. You had no leverage as well. So it kind of took care of itself. I'd love to give Howie the credit, but it kind of took care of itself.
This is why Howie and a lot of good teams do this. They typically, and why Jalen Hurts will get a contract extension this year, they typically like to get their core, their best players signed after 3 years, not in the 4th year, because they know that once you get that close to free agency, it doesn't make sense for the player to sign. He wants to have the market inflate his price tag. So, and he knew that, John, probably going into the year, because this was a very odd roster construction for him, where he had so many guys come in on 1-year deals, whether it was Bradbury, whether it was White, whether it was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So I'm sure he kind of went into the year thinking, this is a little bit different than I'm used to, and I'm going to have to just see this thing through and sort of make miracles at the end of the season.
All right, the Eagles, like all other good organizations in the NFL, use the combine as part of their evaluation for players that they could potentially draft come April, not the be-all, end-all. But it is part of it. And sometimes a guy can really flash out there in Indianapolis and grab everybody's attention, including the Eagles. Anybody flash for you, Moshe, sitting home watching some of these workouts and talking to your sources around the league? Anybody make a step up in their overall standing of potential draft pick status 2 months out before April rolls around? Anybody jump off the page for you?
A couple of people, but really, it should be said that the most important thing for most teams at the combine, other than the Raiders, who definitely look at 40 times, it is the medical evaluations.
Yeah, medical.
Those are it's like the number one priority for a lot of teams. They can tell you that the interviews are really important too. The on-field testing, that's just something that either sends them back to the tape because it didn't match up to what they saw, or it confirms what they saw either positively or negatively. That being said, Anthony Richardson, the Florida quarterback, don't try to compare him to any other quarterback that's ever come out. There's no comparison as far as physical capabilities. He's obviously a project. He's a little bit raw, but in the right hands, amazing. But now, do I think the Eagles will take him? No, of course not. But if he becomes a 4th quarterback, Jody, taken in the top 9, that pushes yet another position player who might be a better overall prospect, right, down a notch. And it leaves, if 4 quarterbacks go top 9, it leaves 6 guys who don't play quarterback that the Eagles could choose from. There's 2 really good pass rushers, and we'll see what happens legally with Jalen Carter and Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson. Those are 3. And then the corners. The corners are the ones that interest me the most, because I really do think that if the Eagles stay at 10, this could be the year that the drought, was a 21-year drought, can be broken of not taking a cornerback in the first round. And what did I know Witherspoon was good. What did Porter Jr. wind up running? I think he was a little faster than people thought.
Well, he's a Penn State guy, so Jeff. I think he ran.
I had to bring that up.
4.12 Penn State. Yeah.
You sure that first wasn't a 3?
No, that'll
Penn State guy.
That'll be at the pro day, Jeff, where he'll run the 4.3.
Of course,
or whatever.
Of course. That Penn State gun is a little itchy there.
Let me follow up for just a quick second with Moshe, in reference to your 4 quarterbacks in the first 9 picks. If Howie had his druthers, would he rather have the 4 quarterbacks go in the first 9 and extra players being pushed down to him for his evaluation to take who he wants? Or would he rather have Richardson available at 10 and answering the phone starting to ring off the hook in the back of the draft round? Hey, Howie, what do you need for that 10th pick? Which do you think he'd rather have? The player who should be better than expected because you didn't expect 4 quarterbacks to go in the top 9, and they could now. Or do you think he'd rather play the Monty Hall, let's make a deal game with that 10th pick if one of those 4 quarterbacks is still sitting there?
It's a phenomenal question. And I would say 95% B, have that quarterback be there at 10 so that someone can trade up. Now, the only thing is sometimes there's that player, right, that would, for whatever reason, elite player falls to 9 or 10, either like Aaron Donald falling to
Will
Anderson
somehow
crazy,
sitting
right?
there at number 10.
Right.
Yeah.
If Will Anderson is there at 10 or Jalen Carter
and hope, right?
Right. Then maybe all bets are off. But, assuming those guys are gone, I think you would love for Anthony Richardson or whoever quarterback to be there, Will Levis at 10, and be able to orchestrate a trade down. Because really, this is not a elite blue chip heavy draft, as I'm told. A lot of people think that it's a strong draft, but it's more strong on B+ talent than superior future Hall of Fame talent. So we're sitting here talking about like Devin Witherspoon as a corner, but there's also Gonzalez, Porter Jr., Emmanuel Forbes. Same thing with some pass rushers. There are some good ones and offensive linemen. And the Eagles could use all of that. So I'm sure they would love to stockpile picks, especially since they don't – what is it? They don't have a pick from in round 4, 5, and 6 or something like that?
4, 5, 6. It goes
that'll change. You could sit here right now and say that is not going to be the case.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard from a couple different people, Jeff, that it's 6 to 8 when you talk about true blue chippers at the top of the draft. Yeah. And if you got 4 quarterbacks going in the top 10, all of a sudden one of those 6 to 8, because I don't know if any quarterbacks are in that group. I really don't. That 6 to 8 group.
Yeah.
At the best players in the draft. So that means if you're the Eagles, they'd love to get more picks, as you mentioned, but I think they're going to go back from 30. I think that's where they're going to get more picks.
I guess the question is, who wants to trade? Usually you trade up to 30 or the last pick or 2 in the bottom of the first round for a pass rusher, right? Or someone you can have that 5th-year option control of. And it's usually a project quarterback like they did with Lamar Jackson a few years ago, or maybe a pass rusher. So I don't know at 30 if someone's going to be there that is going to warrant someone trading up for that extra year of control. But maybe, John, it's possible.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. But before we get to the draft, Moshe, we got to get to free agency. So we kind of mentioned all the players the Eagles have to deal with, and Howie has been above board now twice. He said, hey, look, prepare yourself. We're going to lose some guys. I think everyone assumes they're going to lose James Bradbury, Miles Sanders, players like that. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Javon Hargrave. To me, those are the 2 guys. They're going to get top-of-the-line deals at their respective positions. I think the Eagles want to keep both. Can they keep both?
Sure. Absolutely. You know how we can make money happen by contracts restructuring and doing things. They can keep both and still give Jalen Hurts an extension. The question is, they're not just going to keep both because they like them and just overpay, right? They are very
that's
set
kind
in
of what I
having-
meant. Will
right.
they overpay? So if
Yeah.
someone
I don't think so. I mean, so I had a very interesting conversation with a pretty high level executive from the AFC at the Combine. I asked him what he thought Javon Hargrave would command on the open market, and he said he felt 13 to 15 million a year. And I said, well, that seems a little low, given his sack total, the position that he plays. It was brought to my attention, not that it needed to be. He's not the best run defender in the world. He's also been injured at times. He's also this will be his third contract. So if that's the case, because he got signed by the Eagles on a $13 million a year deal.
Yeah.
If his number is between 13 and 15, I think the Eagles can make that happen. But I will say one thing that we really need to, and someone organizationally brought this up to me that I didn't even think about at the time, but Sean Desai might have some preferences here as to what kind of lineman types he wants for his defensive fronts that may differ a little bit from Gannon. I mean, I don't know if Gannon ever truly wanted a 3 technique in the version of Cox or Hargrave, but that's what he had, so he made it work. But at the same time, Howie's going to say, look, Sean, like if we lose Cox and we lose Hargrave and we lose, you're going to have nobody but Jordan Davis and Marlon Tuipulotu. So you're going to take what I give you. And if we can get this guy at $14 million a year, right, we're going to take Javon Hart and you're going to make it work. But moving on, I do think though that was a sort of best case scenario for the Eagles. It would not surprise me at all if Javon Hargrave got a 16, 17, 18 million a year deal. And if he does, I think that would make it very hard for the Eagles to keep him as opposed to CJ Gardner-Johnson. Look, CJ is an interesting case because he came to the Eagles with sort of a reputation, locker room, not a great locker room guy, on the field being kind of a pestering. And while he seemingly had was his all right this year with the Eagles and certainly a great player, I'm sure they weren't real happy about him tweeting anti-Gannon tweet that he had because the Eagles love Jonathan Gannon. So I think they're going to do everything they can to make it work at their number. And if it doesn't work at their number, they have the franchise tag at their disposal. They don't usually use the franchise tag, but this is an unusual offseason, so it might warrant it.
But they've only got 20 some odd hours left to slap that franchise tag on them because you got to do it by tomorrow.
It's a long time in negotiation business.
Okay,
Jody.
all right. You got faith there, Moshe. I like it. All right, last thing for me, and don't forget Milt Williams at the defensive tackle position. Be interesting to see how Sean Desai fits him in because he impressed at least me second half of the season as a guy who's very much on the improve. All right, last thing. Anybody do any research on Desai disciples from either Seattle or Chicago who are going to be veteran free agents who, if the Eagles can't keep their guys, because as John correctly pointed out, no leverage, they're all working on career years. Was there a good guy, middling guy, maybe an underachiever, maybe an injured guy from one of Desai's former stops that you could see as a fit with the Birds?
I haven't gotten to that. I feel like maybe you're alluding to someone, or if you are, throw it out. Oh, no,
my head.
All right. No,
I haven't either.
The Bears have not.
If you've done the work that I haven't done. Neither one of us have. That's fine.
The Bears haven't really had a great defense since he left, and the
Very
best
true.
defensive players they have are sort of young building block players like Kyler Wilson and Jaquan Brisker. See, I mentioned somebody else first.
Yeah,
John,
you went before the
Penn
Penn State guy. That's
yeah.
impressive.
They got rid of Robert Quinn, so he's already here. So, and by the way, that is kind of interesting. The guy had 18 and a half sacks while Sean Desai was a coordinator.
I don't think he's going to be back, but
probably not. But I felt like throwing it out there. And Seattle was a good team last year, but defensively, I think they were a little bit not so great against the run. I don't know who they have free agency wise.
Hey, Eagles fans are going to love the light boxes, Moshe. It's not changing.
Well,
it's not
we've been seeing that for a while anyway.
InsideTheBirds.com. Listen to the podcast, Geoff Mosher with Adam Kaplan. At Inside the Birds on Twitter, at Geoff Mosher NFL. Follow Geoff. Does a tremendous job. I'll leave you with this.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Patricia, Mike Pettin, who's going to be linebackers coach?
So who's going to be what? Linebacker? Oh, so from what I understand, Mike Pettin's going to wind up staying in Minnesota. He is the assistant head coach there. So he was well compensated. And I believe I was told I think he had 1 year left on his deal anyway. So he'll probably get a little bit of a bump there.
That surprises me because they were bad defensively and they totally shifted from Ed Donatel, who ran the Fangio scheme, to Brian Flores, who runs an entirely different scheme. So I'm a little surprised. But Mike's done a bunch of different stuff. So
Right.
maybe that factors in.
He's a good coach.
So we do know that Sean Desai, we were told, wants to have a linebackers coach who has like senior experience. So it might be like you're a linebackers coach / senior defensive assistant. Also, look out for the name Pagano, not Chuck Pagano, John Pagano, who was a defensive coordinator for the Chargers while Sirianni was there. Now, Sirianni seems to be leaving this to decide, but of course he's going to have influence on it as well. So that's another name that came across my radar there.
That's why we wanted to have Mosher on. He's got good coaching insights and rumors and the like. Always a pleasure, Moshe. Appreciate you jumping in. You know, we're going to get you back on in a couple of weeks. One free agency gets underway, and we get to play the rumor game. It's always fun doing it with you. Thanks, bud.
All right, fellas. Have a good one. Thank you.
Geoff Mosher, InsideTheEagles.com, Inside the Eagles podcast.
Inside the Birds.
Birds. Why do I always say Eagles? My bad. You got to get that right, McDonald. InsideTheBirds.com for Geoff Mosher. All right, Inside the Birds 365 coming back here in just a couple.